Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today.
Okay, episode 15, I think, of Asking Why podcast. Welcome to the show. Super glad to have you guys. We're going to talk about some dietitian stuff today, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We have introduce yourselves and kind of tell us, who you are and what you do.
I'll let you go first.
Okay. I'm Rachel Haynes, and I'm a registered dietitian. I live in Ruston. That's where my practice is, and I'm married. I have 2 kids. My youngest is 1.5, and have a 3.5-year-old as well, 2 girls. So my job is really flexible. I love getting to raise them, be at home with them, but also I love dietetics, and I love being a dietitian. So I'm excited that I've found a job where I can raise them and also live my passion. So, but yeah, I work for a residential facility for women with life-controlling issues, Mercy Multiplied. I consult for them, and that's where really most of my experience in dietetics comes from. Found out about them in college. I went through the internships, which we'll talk about later, and didn't really know what I wanted to do with dietetics. I knew that I loved the field, but when this opportunity came up, I cried when I found out about it, because the dietetics was combining with ministry, and I didn't really know that was possible for me or what that would look like. And so I just dove into this job feeling so nervous about it, feeling really not prepared for it, but that was really such an opportunity for me to trust the Lord and to see that He had prepared me for it for so long. And working with these women, it was like a mirror for me to just see really my own issues and where I needed healing in my relationship with food. So I work primarily with the residents that struggle with eating disorders, and so that's where my journey in eating disorder recovery started, and got to teach them how to live a healthful lifestyle and healthy cooking tips. And they prepared all of their own food, and so just getting to be hands-on with them. Some of them were there for more than 6 months, and so I got to see their whole journey play out, and they also had counseling through the process, so that just opened my mind and appreciation for mental health and for counseling, and how important counseling is in the process of eating disorder recovery, and how they just go hand in hand. And so that job was a huge blessing, and I still get to work for them. I worked in the home for about 5 years, and now I work remotely for them. I work for the 3 other homes in the U.S. and work one-on-one with those that struggle with eating disorders, and help develop the meal planning system, and just make sure that that is strong, and the girls are learning nutrition education, and also developing a healthy relationship with food, and also supporting the counselors as they are working with these residents with eating disorders. And so that backstory is kind of tells me how I got here, and why I'm just so passionate about helping others find freedom in their relationship with food, and how I got into disordered eating recovery.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So what personally, I guess, led you into, when you talked about your struggles with food? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Like what brought to light as you started working, in this field? Because I think all of us do that. As a therapist, we work and, get into therapy because we want to help people, but that doesn't mean we always know what our own stuff is.
Sure.
And so you end up working with people who are like, I do this too, or I need to work on this, or I need to have awareness. And that's a constant struggle, continually. So kind of how did that come about, or would you learn so far?
So in high school is when I learned what a dietitian even was. And so I had a great home ec teacher, nutrition teacher in high school. And so I thought, I'm really interested in that. And I was interested in it personally. So, I thought that's a way that I can help people, because if I'm passionate about it, then I'm going to want to teach about it and live it. And so thankfully, once I started in it in college, I knew Tech had a great program. Louisiana Tech is where I got my bachelor's and my master's degree.
How about them dogs?
How about them dogs? I just went for it, and I liked it. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with it, but I just knew that I loved to talk about it and live it and teach it. And I think really in high school, also, while that discovery was going on, I was really exposed to diet culture as well, and realized that there were some things going on. I couldn't quite identify them yet, but I knew that my relationship with food was starting to change, and honestly, my body size was starting to change, just like growing up and growing into my woman figure. No one really prepared me for that, and so I think I started really seeking control through my eating patterns and my thoughts, and thankfully stayed very healthy. I mean, nothing dangerous as far as my behaviors, but that's when really I feel like my thoughts started changing, and that further developed in college as well. And so all the while I'm learning about nutrition, and I'm learning how to help people with their diet, not so much with their relationship with food, but more so just with their diet and the logistics of that. And all the while I'm seeing issues in myself, and I don't quite know how to address that or talk about it, because I'm thinking, well, I'm learning about all this and I'm supposed to be the expert here, or learning how to be the expert, and I'm struggling and I don't know who to share that with. And so it felt like, it was years where I didn't really tell anybody about it. And because I didn't feel like it was enough of an issue to share, or I normalized it and I minimized it. I felt like a lot of women deal with this, so I'm just normal. This must be my future.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about it. It's just, be dramatic.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to make this a thing when it's not. And there was a little bit of pride there and embarrassment. And so once I started talking about it and realizing that I didn't have to live that way, and that I didn't have to be a perfect dietitian and have all of my eating patterns just right, and that I was allowed to struggle, then I started realizing that there needed to be a voice in this area, and that God called me to that, and I'm not going to do it perfectly, and that's okay. But working for Mercy Multiplied is really where I started understanding how to invite God into that process and surrender it to Him, really and truly, and that freedom was mine. I always thought that I was working for freedom. I was working to eliminate those thought patterns, when really His presence is what I'm striving for, not the absence of those things, but the presence of Him. And really still working on, what does that look like in my life? What does that look like in my clients' lives? And how can I help them understand that this freedom is there for them? And so it's been such an honor to help people do that, and it's so really humbling having to share my story so often, but my suffering wasn't in vain. You know what I mean? That silence that I felt like I was experiencing, or that isolation, I guess I felt like I was experiencing, I'm seeing that I can help people avoid that, and by sharing my story and being vulnerable about it. And so I'm so thankful that I am where I am now, and seeing how much I've grown in these past years and how my relationship with food has healed. I'm excited about the future, and I know that it doesn't stop here, and there's so much more that's going to take place. And so when working with clients and seeing them heal their relationship with food, I'm learning right along with them, and it's humbling to say that, but I think that's what makes a good dietitian and a good counselor.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can't be honest, I tell our staff all the time, if you can't work on your own junk and you can't be honest about your own junk, then you're not as helpful. It's like we go to therapy so we can know what it's like to sit on the couch, and I know what it's like when my therapist yawns or looks at the clock or, does a certain therapeutic technique. And I'm like, it reminds me of how vulnerable it is to be on that, in that other position. to know that my clients who come in and sit, they're coming in with all kinds of things. They may not want to be here. They may be tired. They may be hungry. They pick up on everything you're doing that you're not really intentionally doing. And so I think same thing in all healthcare professionals. I think if people do the work, then they're better at providing it.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, so it's been awesome having you. I know now you're on staff with us in Ruston.
Yep.
So I'm a little biased because I've known Ashley for a very long time, and her and my wife are best friends, and we're in the dietetics internship together. So I'll let you tell your own story. But it was nice when I talked to you, and I'm super thankful for knowing you and what you're bringing to the table in Ruston, because I had some context already for what, in my opinion, makes a good dietitian and how we want to merge those mental health worlds. And so, hearing a little bit of your story and kind of seeing your perspective has been awesome. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
Ashley, go ahead. I could talk forever about you, but I'll let you do it.
Oh boy, that might be dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm Ashley Rachal, and I've been a registered dietitian for almost 9 years now. Maybe almost 10. I don't know. I'd have to do the math on that, but a really long time.
You're getting old.
Yeah, I'm getting old. And so, I am a wife. I'm a mom of 2. My oldest is almost 5, and my youngest is 2.5. And so I'm in private practice. My office is located here within Clint Davis Counseling. I'm the owner of Fulfilled Nutrition Therapy. It's been a long time dream of mine, and I just love the work that I do, getting to work with clients in healing their relationships with food. And I think that's so important. I think that there are not enough resources in this area, or that it's not even understood that we need to do that. It's like we don't even recognize that it's a problem, and we'll get more into detail, I'm sure, as we go along. But really my journey here started a long time ago. When I was a little girl, I was very much raised with family members who were also influenced by diet culture, and they were always dieting. And so I got this subconscious message that your bodies were meant to be controlled. And so I always sort of picked up on that and internalized that, even though I've had the privilege to live in a smaller body all of my life. That didn't seem to that didn't seem to sink in with me. And so, as I got older, it became, just like Rachel mentioned, it became a sense of control. I was constantly trying to control what I ate, how much I ate. And so, that really kind of spiraled a little bit. Definitely disordered eating. I think that if the right clinician had gotten in contact with me at the right time, it would have been something diagnosable as an eating disorder. And so then I went off to college, and life happened and things happened, and I took my first nutrition class. I changed my majors. I was pre-med, cell and molecular biology. Whew. Could not have continued in that. So I took my first nutrition class the summer of my freshman year, or the summer after my freshman year, I guess. And I'll never forget calling my oldest sister. She's 10 years older than me, and she's so wise. And I called her and I said, this is either really going to help me, or this is going to make it so much worse. And I said, I want you to pay attention to that, because I'm scared. I'm really scared. And so I took that nutrition class. I fell in love. I loved everything about it. It's the first time I finally understood that food wasn't meant to be feared, that food had a purpose. Unfortunately, as is the case with most dietetics, education and curriculum, it's all very weight-centric. It's all very much focused on control and that health is this thing that we have to constantly try to be achieving at all times. And so for me, that meant that all of the disordered behaviors of restriction that I had been experiencing just morphed into orthorexia. And for those who are listening who don't know what that is, it's more of this obsession with eating in a way that is healthy or pure. So that means that I only wanted to eat, the healthiest. Just like you mentioned, I thought I had to be the most perfect nutrition student. I had to, and that doesn't work out in reality.
No.
And it didn't for me.
Yeah.
So constantly I found myself feeling like I was failing at being the perfect nutrition student, the perfect future dietitian. And so that led to, more disorder, until I finally got to a place on my own, by the grace of God. I got to a place where it was healthy-ish. It was good enough. And so I went through my internship, I let go of a lot of control. I got a lot of healing in my spiritual life, which came out in the way that I treated my body. Like, those types of things healed. But I would say that it really didn't shift for me until I became a mother. And when I was pregnant with my child, we decided not to find out the baby's gender. And so, much to my surprise, this child was born, and I had a daughter in my arms. And it was miraculous, and it was something I'd always wanted a daughter, because I felt like I could do more. Like, I wanted to protect her from what I had experienced, and I wanted to heal. And then all of a sudden it struck me, like, I have a daughter, and I have so many issues that I need to fix, so I'm not passing on those behaviors to my daughter. Yeah. And so it was really because of her that I was like...
You got me crying on the podcast, so thank you for that.
Yeah, and almost me too. I'm reining it in here. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I've got to heal. I have to get this under control. And so that's when I was like, okay, all of a sudden I'm finding myself, I'd already decided I'm not going back to work full time for a job that I'm less than passionate about. I want to be committed to, being with my child, my firstborn, and, I'm not going to do anything less than what I'm passionate about. And so I set about figuring out what that looked like. And, for me, it was all kind of coming together. When I was an intern, they gave us an opportunity to do a rotation at an eating disorder clinic. And I was like, no way. I'm not going near that with a 10-foot pole. Right. That would be super triggering for me. And I still believe that would have been the case. But then I'm like kicking myself, because I'm like, that would have been the best opportunity. Right. But anyway, I started finding myself in these Facebook groups that were talking about this thing called intuitive eating. And I'm like, why have I never heard of this? That's crazy. Like, what, is this some kind of new diet? What am I talking about here? And so, so the more that I learned, the more that I'm like, yes, that's the first time something has made sense to me. And it was this concept that we were born knowing how to eat, and that goes back to, like, we were created in a way that is beautiful, and it's only when these outside influences that come in that create disorder. And so, like you already mentioned, we call that diet culture, and diet culture is insidious, and it is everywhere. And, for me, those influences came in super young, and so that's what we see, is that when we receive those messages from diet culture that tell us you have to eat this way, it has to be perfect. It's very black and white thinking.
Right, black and white.
Yeah.
A good way to explain it.
Rigid. It's very rigid, and anything less than perfection is failure.
Right. So, and from a mental health standpoint, it's a boundary issue, right? It's rigidity. It's not emotional, it's not connected to who you are as a person, it's just right or wrong.
Right. Yeah. And what you're saying, like, that hits on it perfectly, being connected to yourself as a person. And so intuitive eating focuses on increasing your interoceptive awareness. That is listening to the signals that your body is sending you and responding to them accordingly. And so the more I learned, the more that intuitive eating led me to healing my own relationship with food, to where finally I'm like, I can do this for other people. Like, I'm healthy enough to do this for other people. And, I've continued, that was 5 years ago now. And since then, I have absolutely devoured all sources of information that I could get on it. Books, podcasts, trainings. I sought out specific training in eating disorders, because I'm like, if I'm going to work with this population, then I need the best of the best. Like, I want to do everything possible to let them know that healing is possible. And so, it's been a journey, all along in my career, and I'm so thankful for every step of my career and every step of my life that brought me to this moment, because I truly believe that this is God's purpose for me, is to share his message, share healing, share hope in community with other people. And I just love that I get to do that every day.
Yeah.
That I get to have people who walk into my office, and sometimes they're happy, and sometimes they might be, confused about what's going on for them and not really know. Sorry, these are like falling off my head. Not really, maybe they're hopeless, you know? And so I get to walk alongside them in this beautiful journey of healing, and knowing that they don't have to go through it alone.
Absolutely.
And, our work is so beautifully blended with mental health, and so many of the clients that we see they're already in therapy doing the work. And if not, we get them in there real quick.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I appreciate you sharing all that, because that's why I love having you guys as a part of the staff, and our other integrated wellness people was, part of my journey. I know, Ashley, you know it really well, but having, a kid with FPIES and a really bad rare food allergy, it was just, the dietitians we did go to see were very focused on, symptoms-based treatment, and not really getting to the root causes, and not really understanding.
Yeah.
And while they were trying to treat something that they didn't really know about, they weren't taking into consideration the trauma and the emotional toll it took on my wife and me, and breastfeeding and all these things. And, we would go to Dallas we went to Dallas like 7 times over the course of 2 years, and it was just a lot. And the answers were always very much like, well, just do this.
Prescriptive.
Yeah, and it didn't take into consideration what that was going to cost you, the time, the energy, the emotional toll. It was just like, well, just formula. Everybody's like, well, just go to formula. And it's like, well, formula is fit. Insurance doesn't cover this.
Yeah.
Even though I'm paying $900 a month for Blue Cross Blue Shield, they don't cover the $55 to $75 can of formula.
Right.
And you have to, y'all know formula goes really, really fast.
Right.
And so you're buying $500-$600 worth of formula a month, so you can just breastfeed. Just do formula and not breastfeed. It's like, so that was my first look at and JC's, my wife is a dietitian too, and, went to school. But I think because of, and she would probably say this, because of the diet culture, it was just nothing she ever became super passionate about.
Yeah.
Because of the hangups of that. It just never connected emotionally with the whole person. And because we had a kid and had special needs, she stopped being a dietitian and was at home.
Yeah.
And people were like, well, that's so awesome. She was a dietitian. That must have been so helpful. And we laugh, because not being a dietitian, I think it definitely was helpful, but it wasn't as helpful as you would think it would be.
Yeah.
Right. It was helpful because she knows what dextrose is and I don't.
Yeah.
So when you're looking on the back of something, you're like, what's dairy? And she's like, well, these 3 things are dairy. The world doesn't know that.
No.
And so then we got another look at what it's like to be around people. And I think it's funny, food and sex, are in the same category on Maslow's hierarchy of need, they're basic needs, but they're also 2 things that people do not know how to talk about. And so if you're an alcoholic or you drink and you show up at a party and you don't drink, if any of you've ever been to a group where everybody's drinking and you're the one not drinking, everybody freaks out.
Yeah.
They're like, why aren't you drinking? You should drink. Here's a drink. It's the same thing with food. We show up to a birthday party with Grady and he doesn't have a cupcake or can't have it or can't eat Johnny's pizza that's given by everybody. And it's almost like everybody's offended or everybody's insecure that we're not eating what they are. So they either look at us like the family who's like, oh, well, their kids don't get pizza. And I'm like, I wish he could eat this pizza. I would give him the whole thing.
Absolutely.
But you're constantly dealing with this judgment or criticism because of everybody else's relationship with food.
Yes.
It's not really your relationship with food.
Oh, yeah.
It's the fact that they don't understand their relationship with it.
Yeah.
They're just doing the normal, this is what we do. You have a pizza party, and they don't think, is one of the 20 kids, can they all eat this? Their assumption is that everybody can eat pizza, and that's what you do. And, and so there's that whole culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, in that, I'm like, okay, how can we be a mental health facility and practice that takes all of that in consideration? And so it's been cool to see both of you, send referrals and get referrals and know that, the people are getting holistically taken care of. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're in an area in which you're struggling with this, find a place that does that. If you don't live here or you're, find a place that, you're going to have to advocate for yourself. And that's the hardest part, is us having to kind of chase down resources and figure out who's going to do what and try people out and then be like, that didn't work, or that's the same thing.
Right.
Anyway, what are some myths or kind of barriers that you guys have found in your practices? I mean, you touched on them a little bit, but about like diet culture, like can y'all like talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that, I think one of the first things people misunderstand about going to see a dietitian or what dietitians do is we're going to give a list of rules, or we're going to
a meal plan.
We're gonna,
Yeah.
Can you make me a meal plan?
We're just going to hand out a meal plan, which
You would be rich if you wrote all the meal plans that people asked you to, I'm sure.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and a small part of me, I mean, loves a meal plan. It's like this puzzle that you can figure out, and I love the idea of a meal plan, so I can relate to people wanting that. They want very black and white.
They don't want to think about it.
No, absolutely not. I mean, and
It's a fix.
It's a fix. And I mean, there are certain areas of my life where I want to fix.
Absolutely.
So I get that. I get why people say it, and I try to have empathy for it, and explain to them why I don't do that, and why I want to teach them how to eat, and I want to teach them to listen to their bodies, and of course listen to what their concerns are and why they want the meal plan. But I know that there's certain health challenges out there where a meal plan is absolutely necessary, maybe for weight restoration, or if there are intolerances or allergies, that's there's a time and a place for it. But I think general population, those that are seeking or pursuing a healthy lifestyle or want some education in as far as nutrition goes, they think that a meal plan is the answer. And so I think that people often think that we will give the meal plan, and in turn they're going to have a list of rules, and we're going to take away a lot of their...
We're the food police.
We're the food police.
That's what they think.
Yeah. We're going to, remove the pleasures, some of the pleasures of their life. And some, they're kind of blind to it at first. They think, well, that's what I need. That's what I want. I need somebody to give me some tough love and tell me what not to eat, and then that's going to fix
slap food out of
me.
my hand.
Yeah.
I've had people say that. Just slap food out of my
Right.
hand.
Yeah. I mean, hold me accountable. Make sure that I don't do these things. And that's so the opposite of what we do. And I want to add to their life. I want to explain how they can have freedom in their life and what that can look like, and that's possible in their relationship with food. I mean, a lot of people don't even know they have a relationship with food,
Right.
or even a belief system about food. And so that's a lot of what I do with my clients, is help them understand that you have this whole belief system about food that you didn't even know is there. It starts with your experiences in childhood and exposure to diet culture and what you believe about your body. There's so much that goes into it. And so helping, unfolding that and helping people see that, then they start to realize that I don't necessarily need very black and white answers, and teaching them to make these decisions really for themselves. But I think a lot of where that comes from, that desire for a meal plan or rules, food rules they beg to be broken. We just weren't meant to follow a diet. We weren't, there's a reason why we fail at them. And so
It violates our autonomy.
Absolutely.
We want that sense that, like, I like to tell people to think of it as like your brain and your body. When they are disconnected and they are not talking to one another, because usually your brain's trying to take control. It's trying to say, like, no, you shouldn't eat that.
Right.
Your body's going, watch me. Just wait and watch me. Because eventually that restrictive mindset, you telling yourself, I'm not going to eat this food, whether it's sugar or carbs or candy or, whatever, your body eventually something is going to happen, and that's going to shift, and you get your hand on that food, and then all of a sudden you feel out of control.
Powerless, yeah.
Yeah, and so it leads us to, it like reinforces this false narrative that we can't control ourselves around that food, and that way we should just not
Eliminate
even keep it in
it.
the house.
Right.
Yeah, eliminate it. Right. I can't control myself. It's a trigger food for me. I'm just going to take it out altogether.
Right.
When in reality, it was your body just fighting for that sense of autonomy. It was fighting for the ability to choose whether or not it can eat and enjoy that food. So, for a lot of people that come in and they say, like, oh, I'm out of control. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about that relationship with food and dig in. And 9 times out of 10, you'd say, it's restriction that causes the binge.
Yeah.
Whether that's physical restriction or mental restriction, that is what causes us to feel so chaotic and out of control.
And the look on people's faces when you explain the science of it, and that they're not broken. And this is a very natural physical response to restriction.
Right.
it's almost emotional to see that they realize, I've done this for years and I'm not broken. My body's fighting for me, and God designed my body to respond this way. I mean, I remember when that started clicking for me, and it was just so freeing, and I just wanted to share it with people. Like, this is this is very healthy for your body to respond with a binge. That sounds crazy, but it's a healthy physical response. Very natural,
Because the idea is that, if you are binging or responding in that way, overeating even, not even a full binge.
Sure.
Is that you don't have willpower, or that you're weak.
Yes.
And that is not the case at all. It's not the case at all, It's one of those things where that's diet culture that's telling you that, no pain, no gain, right? Again, that is not the case here. Like, if something is harming you, that's your body's indication. Just stop doing that thing, and the same thing goes with food. Like, if you are constantly feeling so out of control, it's time to take a step back and say, like, what is really going on here?
Right.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I mean, it's crazy as you're saying it, because it's the same thing with sex. It's the same thing with drugs. It's the same thing with alcohol. Like, it's just the brain's way of coping. And so we were talking before, like, about the mental health aspect, and I'll jump a little bit, but like, it's just a symptom of the emotional component.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, the real issue below all of that is how we view ourselves and how we find identity. That's really the core issue.
Yeah.
How your dad said something about food, or the moment, like with sex addiction or drugs and alcohol, it's always, well, there was this moment where I got busted and this thing happened and I felt deep shame.
Yeah.
And I learned this. And then they're in my office and we're walking through, and it's the same thing. This light bulb goes on, and they realize, like, oh, me watching pornography, or me, drinking, or me smoking was not just a random event that started happening. It was directly connected to my trauma and my emotions and my identity with myself, or who I wanted to be with and connect with, or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the same way, people just we don't as a culture in general talk about mental health. And so these things are just siloed. You have your dietitians, you have your lawyers, you have your police officers, you have your therapists, Now, the therapists are the only ones who deal with mental health. Everybody else is just doing their thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, all of that starts with your emotional and your spiritual life and what plays out of it. So as I'm listening to you guys, I'm like, man, that sounds like everything I do in my office, which is beautiful because that's so different than, and people listening to this probably are thinking the same thing. Like, that's such a different ideology than going and changing your diet.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, part of our job is to help them to see that it's not about the food.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I barely talk about food, I feel like, honestly.
Well, we call sex addiction an intimacy disorder. And people have a really hard time understanding that it's not about sexuality.
Yeah.
Alcoholism's not about the alcohol. It's about the emotional. That's just a symptom. So that's I mean, I know we've talked about this a little bit but it's exciting for me to hear it, because it's just such a reminder for people listening that there are answers,
right?
That they can actually have control in a healthy way, because
they can have freedom,
right? And it's not necessarily control in the sense of I'm empowered, is what I mean.
Absolutely.
which is a sense of control, but it's not control in the sense of where a diet would come in and say, I'm going to physically, control it.
Yeah.
But you're going to feel more empowered, which gives you, a feeling of control.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of why people want the plan, and they put a label on it. Yeah. Like, I'm doing something for my health, and I don't think they go into it thinking that I'm stepping into diet culture. They want to be healthy. They want to pursue health, but I think, it goes back to our flesh. I mean, our desire to really idolize food, idolize our eating patterns. Ultimately, we want to be our own gods. We don't want to surrender our eating patterns to the Lord. We don't want to. It feels scary. It feels uncomfortable when we have a list of yeses and nos, or good foods or bad foods. That feels comfortable. That feels safe. It feels like it's control. That they're seeking, and so I think that that's what hit me. It wasn't necessarily. I think I realized I wasn't correcting behaviors, but now. I want people to understand how to be obedient in this area, and how to seek freedom in a lasting way, and not just a behavior correction type of way, where we're really getting to the root of, you're not broken because you want that list of yeses and nos. You're not broken because you want to jumpstart your new year with a new eating pattern. Like that's,
of course
those
you
are healthy
do.
responses.
Of course you
but
do. That's what diet culture has told
Absolutely.
us. Is like, that's just what you do.
That's
new
what you
year,
do.
New you.
It's healthy. It's labeled
Yeah.
healthy, but kind of realizing the root and the part of us that wants, we want to control it. We want to be our own gods. And our bodies are our first reminder that we are not God. You know, we have this flesh. We have, our bodies are aging. And, you know, we are constantly reminded that we're out of control with our bodies. So food is the first place we tend to jump to. Like, I'm going to get back in control. I'm going to be in charge of this. And I'm going to do it through my list of yeses and nos. I mean, that's exactly what Eve was pursuing with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, just wanting a yeses and nos. I want to know. I want to be the one in charge. And because not feels scary. Not being in charge feels really scary.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people are coming to us expecting, you know, with the meal plan or with the list of yeses and no that they're asking for, what they're wanting is our authority.
Yes.
And I think that where we are different than some of the more traditional dietitians
Right.
is
It's a
that
good word. Yeah, traditional.
we're helping them to understand that they are the authority over their own bodies. They've just they've just become so disconnected from their body sensations, their hunger, their fullness. You know, sometimes I get people in my office and they're like, I don't even know what I like anymore. I don't even know what foods I like.
Yeah.
And so it's really helping them to understand it's still there. That we're helping you get back to default mode. We're not introducing something new. This is how you were created to eat.
Yeah.
And so you're the authority. Let's help you uncover what that is. You know,
Right.
let's help peel back all of those layers until we can get back to who you are at the core, what's important to you, and really like listen and tune in to your body once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. It because the process, it sounds really intimidating, but I mean the reality is it just takes time, and a lot of
a
people
journey.
People don't like that.
they don't
No.
like it, especially with your diet or changes with your body. They don't want to hear that it takes time, and it
Top 10 questions. How long is this going to take?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Recovery is the same way.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm
What do you
sure.
mean I'm not going to be sober in 6 months? I'm like, you know, it's a 2 to 3 year process.
Yeah.
And they're like, what?
I would
You know,
say eating
money,
disorders
time,
similar.
energy. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
and what I try to remind people is like, it shows how little, we, because all of us do this, how short-sighted we are. And God shows us that a lot, you know.
Yeah.
But if you think about like adjusting your life in a year or in 2 years, once you adjust it and you get good enough and you get relatively comfortable and you find some freedom, then you have 30 to 50 years left of your life to do life in a totally different way.
Yes.
But people forget, like, oh gosh, 2 years, 3 years, it's overwhelming. I'm never going to make that. So
Yeah.
then they spend 40 years being miserable,
Yes.
you know, and being
Exactly.
unhealthy. And when it comes to food, but also mental health, they don't live long enough for that to be a thing. And I think we're seeing that right now. You know, JC and I were talking about this over the break. Like, we both got COVID and the whole family had COVID for 2 weeks. And we were talking about just like symptom, and you know, everybody who listens to this podcast is going to, you know, hear me say this 100 times, but it's like focusing on symptoms and not treating the root problem and asking, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not going to get into a big COVID debate, but the reality is a lot of what we're doing to deal with COVID is all symptom-based treatment. It's like, well, you know, all people are dying and people are getting sick when they get COVID, and there are a lot of variables, and some people seem relatively healthy and get it and crash. So that's not everybody. But in general, the answers are the same. You know, drink water, take your vitamins, eat well,
Yeah.
exercise,
Yeah.
and the likelihood of something taking you out is going to be a lot less likely.
Sure.
But we don't want to do those things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The answers are similar. They're the same.
Yeah. We talk about engaging in health promoting behaviors.
Right.
you
And
know?
preventative work. And we
Yeah.
just have this system of care in America where it's don't do any of that. Do the quick fix. And then when it gets bad, somebody better come up with a system to where we can fix this right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people come to mental health, to dietitians with the same thing, like, hey, I'm 60 pounds overweight, or I'm anorexic, or I'm bulimic, or I'm doing these things, and I need the immediate answer. now
Yeah.
to fix this tragedy that I'm in. And it's like, well, hold on, we got to go back to before and figure out how you got to this place.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, then you'll just be right back here. And I feel like that's what diet culture does a lot, is that people, it does work,
Yes.
right, for
Yeah.
a short period of time.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
But I can't tell you the amount of clients, and myself personally, who have tried to eat whatever, and they maintain it for a little while, they look better, they feel a little bit better, and then they just crash
Yeah.
and they gain 40, 50 pounds back.
Yeah. And that's the illusion, right? The illusion is that diets are successful, that if I do this, or like everyone knows that guy, like, oh, I know that person who did this diet or whatever, and it worked. Just look at them, but some things that are really important to understand about diet culture is that, one, it's a $72 billion industry. No industry gets to be that big if it was built for success. It's not. It's built for repeat customers.
Yep.
So that tells you, first and foremost, that diet culture and the dieting industry is already setting you up for failure, because the diets were never meant to be successful. If they were, they'd be bankrupt.
Yeah.
And so, even knowing that, we see the same thing specifically like with Weight Watchers.
Yeah.
It's the same program. It's just being rebranded. It's not Weight Watchers anymore. Now it's WW.
Yeah.
And now they're focused on wellness. They took weight and all weight messaging out of their marketing and stuff like that.
They're picking up on it.
Yeah, they're picking up on the shift in our culture.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they're just co-opting the messages that we're trying to put out there,
Right.
co-opting the messages of wellness. And really that's just another diet by a different name.
Yeah.
But that's the idea that that diet culture puts out there, is that, you can be successful. And so what we see is that within it looks successful in the beginning. You go on a diet, you drop weight. But what happens is that your body, it will adjust. Your body is built for survival. It's built for homeostasis. That's the way that we were created. And so it responds to any form of restriction. Doesn't matter what you restrict.
Right.
If you're in an energy deficit, your body's going to slow down your metabolism first. And then it's going to start to store everything, because it believes that you are starving. It has no idea that you're doing this on purpose. Because why would you? Why would you starve on purpose?
Right.
And so because of that, it slows down your metabolism. You're going to lose weight initially, and then you're going to hit that plateau. And then the behaviors that you engaged in are not sustainable, because they never were. And then you're going to see the weight creep back on. And then, in many cases, you feel like a failure. And so you're just going, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. I'm just going to go back. And so what we see is that over time, your health is not impact, like the way that we word it is that, the biggest predictor of weight gain is going on a diet. And actually, when we look at impacts on health, body size is not actually the important factor.
Right.
It is weight cycling. Dieting has a worse impact on your health than just staying at your current body size. And so, I don't know how much time we have to get into things like weight stigma and,
No, go ahead. We're here
yeah.
yeah, we got another hour.
Perfect. Well, just kind of addressing that, part of our framework that we use is called health at every size. Often that is very, it gets confusing for people. They interpret that as healthy at every size. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how we can pursue health at every body size, and that improving your health does not mean shrinking your body. It means engaging in health promoting behaviors. If your body size changes as a result of that, we remain completely neutral about that.
Yeah.
Okay, your body changed. I know a lot of people really want to celebrate that, but we want to celebrate what were your behaviors like,
Yeah.
What health promoting behaviors. And by that, I mean, eating in a way that makes your body feel its best. That is way different than prescribing a diet for somebody, because
Right.
what makes me feel my best is very different from what makes you feel your best, or what Rachel feels
Right.
best with.
We don't know those answers. We
Yeah.
don't have those answers for them. And so
Right.
helping them
Yeah.
discover that is part of it.
Yeah, and that's such
Yeah.
a good, again, tying in mental health, that's such a good parallel, because I don't care what people do. And, one of my clients, and he'll probably listen and know, but he always well, don't say you don't care. So I need to reframe it. But it's I care so much that I don't have any judgment for it.
Right.
So if you want to drink 2 beers a day, if you want to do whatever, but how is it impacting your life and your family
Oh,
and
yeah.
your system and your functioning?
Yeah.
You know, that's
absolutely.
not my place to judge it. You know, like, I mean, even from like a pornography standpoint or these things we work in, like, not everything is addiction.
Yeah.
Not everything's good for you. But I don't know people's history. Like, if
Yeah.
you've been sexually abused and have all this trauma and the best you can do is pornography once a month to maintain, like, yeah, we want that to be free, or you want that to be free, then we'll keep working on it. But if right now that's better than every day and
Yeah.
honesty is better than perfection, then that's the goal together, is to
Yeah.
say, how can we be honest and have integrity and be congruent, not how can we be perfect?
Yeah.
How can our behavior, right, get our
Right.
value? So it's really cool. I mean, I'm really, like, you know, nerding out about y'all doing this because it's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, you saying that it makes us, it makes clients less have to confess to us. You know, they're not confessing to us all the bad things that they've eaten or the bad ways that they've treated their body, when we're really helping them discover what the answer is
Yeah.
for what is
coming
healthy for their
alongside 'em.
body. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because, I mean, we've all heard people, I mean, shame themselves about what they eat. I hear
Oh,
it all
all
the
the time.
time.
Yes.
I mean, not even in work that we do, but just like, you're at a party, you're at a friend's house, you're for Christmas, and people are like, well, I know I'm going to eat this other thing. And nobody, I'm not even looking at what people eat.
Right.
You know?
We're all too worried about what we're eating,
Oh,
what our
Absolutely.
bodies are
100%.
feeling.
I have that
Yeah.
conversation so often with clients especially clients that spent time with family over Christmas. And now that they've gotten some freedom, they can see how much freedom a lot of their loved ones need. And
Yeah.
just walking them through how to maintain that freedom and also be around their families and really just grow in confidence of what they know about their bodies and what they know is good for their eating pattern. It's hard to watch. People question what they know to be true because of the influence of their families.
Yeah.
But and a lot of times my clients they feel like pioneers in their families. They're like, I am the only one that wants
Because
freedom.
It's so countercultural.
Yes,
It is not
it
the
is.
norm. Like, if you're saying, you know, like, please don't talk to me about your diet, I'm really focusing on my relationship with food,
Yeah.
you're a weirdo.
Yeah.
Like, no one knows what you're talking about.
Oh, you're absolutely a weirdo.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I tell people this all the
Yeah.
time. You want to be a weirdo.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, in our culture, people want to be normal.
Yeah.
They don't want to be isolated. We already all feel disconnected and isolated, and that's
Yeah.
such a human condition. So we don't want to do anything that makes us fall into this minority culture. But as Christians, like, we're actually called to do that.
Yeah.
We're called to
So
go down
good.
this narrow road and in this small path and through this tiny gate.
Yeah.
And that means we're always going to do weird stuff with food, with money, with relationships, with parenting. We're usually going to have to find, and that means we have to find a community of people around us who are validating,
Yeah.
Yeah.
who support what our goals are with a non-judgmental stance,
Right.
and can deal with nuance and differences. And that's a
Yeah.
small pool of people.
Yeah.
You know, and so when people are thinking about that out there, like right now, like, how could I do this? Nobody supports me. You got to get a different support group.
Yeah.
You're going to have to, you know, maybe find a group and,
That's
you know, find a dietitian that's supportive. And then
Right.
as that person's supportive, you find other people. But sometimes you have to start with a therapist or a dietitian because the other people around you are not going to do it yet.
Yeah.
And they're not going to get it. But what you find out as you get healthier is that you don't need them to. Because as you're a healthy, congruent person, then you can stand on your own. But yeah, it's hard in the beginning to go home to family.
Yeah.
And people don't see the connection of, like, we're in Louisiana, so it's crawfish. Right? And it's like we have crawfish boils and we have our families over and we all eat and we celebrate and we sit around the table and
Yeah.
Uncle so-and-so comes from this and so-and-so come back from Afghanistan and we're all going to do this thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're there and you're like, well, I'm going to eat a salad and some chicken,
Right.
Yeah.
everybody's like, what? Because somehow you're taking away from their experience by not partaking in the thing.
Right.
Because food is relational. The way
Exactly.
we eat is relational. It's how
Right.
we communicate with their people.
Well, and what an opportunity to steal our joy and distract us, truly distract us from something so beautiful, such a gift. I mean, I know as a dietitian, I used to kind of resent the fact that I lived in Louisiana. I was like, oh, we have it harder than other dietitians because we live in such a
Yeah.
food centered culture here. And now I really view it as such a privilege. It's so beautiful how people come together with food, around
Yeah.
food, and we talk about food and we swap recipes. And before, in the back of my mind, I felt like I couldn't be a part of that because I was a dietitian. As crazy as that sounds, like I will never be in that world where I can enjoy this really buttery, rich, whatever. I don't want to pick on butter because I love butter. I felt like I couldn't be a part of it. And
You can't
now-
eat king cake.
you can't eat king cake, or you can't eat too much, or you have to eat it right after you work out, or whatever.
Or we have to healthify it.
We have to make
we
it
have to
gross.
substitute applesauce for butter in recipes.
We do. That's all we do. You and I don't have butter at our house.
No.
That's what the world is thinks about us. But
I've eaten in her house. She has butter.
yes, yeah. But it really is a beautiful thing, and I think I know a lot of people are probably local listening, and so you can enjoy the culture that we live in, and we can do it healthfully. We can do it in a way that is freeing and what's good for us. I mean, there are certain things I don't eat because they don't make me feel good, and I would love to eat them, but they genuinely don't make me feel well. And I know when I choose not to, there might be judgment. But as I'm growing in my confidence in my relationship with food, I don't care what they think. I genuinely don't care.
Because they don't have to go home with you.
They don't.
You know, they don't have to deal with the consequences of being tired or having, mucus or whatever. I mean, I know, that's the stuff that happens. Like, when we got sick, like, JC was like, no dairy because it's going to make us feel terrible and we're not going to recover.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So it was like 3 weeks I didn't eat any dairy. And like this week I went like Chick-fil-A earlier, and I can already feel like I'm coughing more, phlegms more.
It's very real.
Like, I'm like, it's not COVID, I promise. I'm just coughing because I ate dairy and I'm probably allergic to it in some way.
Yeah. So in that example, like, you're not avoiding dairy because dairy is bad or dairy is, in that moment, like,
and I'm
you're
not going to stop
choosing,
eating it.
Yeah, right. Like, you chose to avoid or limit how much dairy that you had as a form of self-care because
Absolutely.
for you, it increases mucus production just like it does for many, many people. And so when you're getting over COVID and you're already hacking up stuff, you don't want to do anything to make that thicker. The way that you do self-care is drink plenty of liquids, make sure you're getting sleep, and then of course avoid things that are going to make things worse. That's the thing when people come to me, and if they might have something that are an intolerance, like whether it's a dairy intolerance or something else too, it's what is the reason behind the avoidance? Is it because of your belief systems around that food? Are you avoiding it because of this set of rules, or is it a form of self-care because it doesn't make your body feel its best? That's where we do the work in session to figure out, like, to pull that apart, because sometimes we see that people avoid things because it's like reinforcing the narrative, like whether it's dairy or gluten. Gluten is often something that gets pulled from people's diets right off the bat without
It's the culprit.
without any true intolerance. Those intolerances exist. One of my siblings, when that person eats gluten, they consume it, and then they immediately feel bad in their joints ache, they have no energy, immediately start swelling.
Tell me what gluten is, or for the average person listening, because that's, being a food allergy parent, when I send my kids to school or to a party, people look at me like you're one of those people who are just like gluten-free for the fun of it, and you're just being ridiculous. Even some of our family members would be like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I'm like, well, he could die. Like, that's not like a small thing. He's not going to get like some little itchiness and then he'll be over it in 30 minutes. Like, he's going to, start vomiting and go into shock. But people don't get that. So what is gluten? Because I think that is a big one in the culture where people are like not trying to eat it, or I'm going gluten-free. And so tell me a little bit about the pros and cons of that.
So gluten is the protein that's found in wheat. And so many of the diets around here have popularized avoiding either carbohydrates in general or going gluten-free. And so, for many people, what they say is that, okay, well, I took gluten out of my diet. I feel better. And first we would take a look at, what else did you do? When you took out gluten, was it actually like removing gluten, or was it the fact that you actually ate some more vegetables than what was normal?
What'd you replace it with?
Of course. Did you feel better because you ate more fruits and vegetables than you were previously? But, or on the opposite end of that, like, we know food intolerances do exist, but when people remove it and then they eat again, usually what happens is, going back to that restrictive mindset, they restricted it for so long, then they ate a whole bunch of it in one sitting once they finally couldn't maintain that anymore, because they weren't doing it for self-care. They were doing it for dieting reasons, or food rules reasons. And so they eat a high carbohydrate load, a high, gluten load meal, and then all of a sudden they feel really bloated, which reinforces the narrative, like, oh, I can't eat this.
It's bad for me.
Because it's bad for me, because it makes me feel bloated. That is a very natural response to removing carbohydrates and bringing them back in, because carbohydrates are stored in our muscles as glycogen. And for every 1 gram of glycogen, it pulls in 4 pounds? a lot of water.
Yes.
Yeah, for every 1 gram of glycogen stored in your muscles, it pulls in a lot of water. And so when you remove it and then you add it back in, all of a sudden, all the water rushes back into your cells.
Yeah.
And so when people have removed that, they drop water weight. They think it's weight loss.
Yep.
Then they add it back, and all of a sudden they feel bloated.
Mm-hmm.
It's reinforcing this negative narrative that, oh, wait, gluten really was the problem.
Right.
Or
So it's
even
not.
fear.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, and I would say too, that gives people black and white rules. They think, okay, well, gluten is the problem, so I'm going to eliminate it. And then in turn, they're like, well, I'm eating better as a result, but that's, like you said, likely why they feel better.
Yeah.
But then there's this halo effect around gluten-free foods. And so you kind of unknowingly eat more of them. And
Talk about the halo effect
Well-
for those who don't know.
Yeah.
well, I mean, and you can add to this for sure, but you just label foods as health foods and safe foods because they are either gluten-free or dairy-free, or they're free of whatever food you have deemed bad or
Yeah.
wrong.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Like, a lot of it's the labeling, the marketing labeling. Like, you'll see
Oh,
something
yeah.
that says gluten-free on it, and you're like, oh, well, this is healthy, so I'll get this. And it's like
Yeah.
terribly
Yeah.
loaded in sugar and fat. So can you, I'll
Well,
shut
or
up.
like the word natural. I mean, it's not regulated. It's not
Yeah.
regulated. So
Yeah.
you could put natural on really gross things. I mean, I don't want you could say anything is natural, and people are like, oh, this must be healthy. So
Well, give an
it's really
example.
misleading. I mean, you could put, like a bag of potato chips. These
Right.
are natural. And,
Yeah, they are the potato.
Yeah, sure. It was once a potato, So
Yeah.
I think that people rely on labels a lot, and that's part of what we do is we provide education on that and what to look for, and also not to get overwhelmed by it. I mean, I try to narrow down the list of things that you're really looking for. But as far as the halo effect of certain foods that you are labeling as healthy, you just overconsume it. Because you've eliminated so many other foods, then you're like, well, my options are so limited, so I'm going to eat this whole bag of gluten-free Oreos, when or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. And you could have the Oreos with gluten in them and then be more satisfied and eat
that-
less of them.
Yeah. So I actually just had that conversation with a client today. It was low carb chocolate bars. And, the person was saying, like, I just can't control myself around these low carb chocolate bars.
Yeah.
And so, as we were talking, what I explained was that your body is seeking satisfaction from something that you're not giving it.
Yeah.
So whenever you feed it low carb chocolate bars, it's thinking, okay, this is kind of chocolate-ish.
Yeah.
But the satisfaction piece is missing.
No.
I am looking for that. And I'm going to
Absolutely.
keep turning up that preoccupation with this food until you give me what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So what I explained was that if we just sat down and had a piece of real chocolates, not low carb chocolate, like
And
the
ate
real
it very
stuff,
mindfully and
Yeah.
enjoy,
you'd be
thoroughly
satisfied
enjoyed
from
it.
that
Yeah.
because your brain and your body would go, okay, that's exactly what I wanted. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I wanted to expand a little bit more on the halo effect of foods. In that, what it also does is those labels, they're assigning moral value to foods.
Oh, yeah.
It's saying these foods are good, these foods are bad, and we all know what happens with labels.
Yep.
We take those external labels and then we turn them in.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm bad for eating this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give some specific examples? Because I think
yeah.
this is a trap we fall into a lot as professionals is we forget what we know.
Yeah, like
You
we
know
know,
what I
we
mean?
know what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah. And so it's like the average person out there is learning. I mean, I'm learning a lot just sitting here listening, but I'm trying to always think about the average person. So give some specifics and I want to get into, don't let me forget to get into like cleaning your plate and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
okay.
But so give an example.
Yeah, so whenever you are assigning labels to food, so let's start with good because people can kind of relate that a little bit better. So a salad is good, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Vegetables.
So we think when we eat salads, we are being good.
Yeah, no matter how much ranch we put on it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but the moral value is there. The halo effect is there. I totally even forgot about that term,
Yeah.
but yeah, it has a halo effect on salad. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you put in that salad. It's a salad, right?
Right.
So on the opposite end of that scale, we have the foods that we call the bad foods.
Yeah.
And for many people, that looks very different. I always ask people, like, what does that mean to you? For some people, like, tempura fried broccoli is a bad food. And for other people, like, oh, it's still broccoli, you know? But so let's use classic examples, desserts. And I love this because this is going to tie back to marketing. You know, desserts we think of as bad. And so when we eat that, we say, oh, I'm going to be bad tonight and get a piece of chocolate
I'm going
cake.
to cheat.
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat.
This is my cheat meal. This is my cheat day.
Cheat meal, cheat day.
Yep.
Yeah. And so,
Oh, man.
so marketing really plays into that. And it's saying things like sinful decadence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so
That's funny.
when we use terminology like that, we're saying like sinful. We all know what sinful means, whether you're a believer or not. You know, that's a very powerful term. And so when you're labeling foods, good, bad, clean, by
Yes.
association, even if we're not using the word, our brain's already saying dirty.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
So I am dirty for eating this. I'm bad for eating this.
When there's some,
Yeah.
you know, provocativeness to that. You know, there's some sexiness to doing the sinful, you know, sinfully delicious.
Decadence is
yeah,
what they
yeah,
use.
for sure.
Yeah. So things like that, you know, are really, so when we're assigning moral value to food, we're assigning moral value to us. And so
Ooh,
that's
good.
What
Yeah.
we're really trying to help
it's
people
terrible,
to
but-
see is food neutrality.
Yeah.
We're not saying that, you know, decadent chocolate cake is on the same nutritional playing field as broccoli at
Right.
all. We know that's not true. The nutritional profile is way different. But what we are saying is that we don't have to demonize foods and put other foods up on a pedestal because you're doing the same thing to your behavior. If you just have a neutral relationship with those foods, then you're able to allow yourself to enjoy all foods without any limitations or restrictions.
No labels, yeah.
Yeah, with no labels.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And he designed us to know how to do that. We've really overcomplicated eating. I think it started as a pursuit to help people. It really did. And now, I mean, the enemy's just taken it over and wants us to seek our righteousness through our eating pattern, which we can't. And so, you know, this message that if you are on a better diet, you are better, you are good. I was good today. I've been good all week, you know.
Oh, I hear that all the time.
I've been
yeah.
good all week. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
out and have my
I'm
chips
gonna
and
treat
queso. I'm gonna
myself.
treat myself. Yeah,
I
that's
deserve
just,
this.
I deserve
That is
this.
so
I have to
common.
earn this by
Yeah.
association.
You
That's
do
what we
have
see
to
with
earn
exercise.
it. I've been good
Yeah.
all week, so I have to earn it. I mean, that is incredibly common and well accepted across the board. And so, being different and saying that's not going to be my narrative. That's not. I'm not going to label these food. You know, people are uncomfortable with it because you're taking away a means for them to feel good and a means for them to feel like they're earning their righteousness through their eating pattern, and that's really hard for people. I work with clients on that a lot when they don't realize, because they're health enthusiasts by nature, a lot of them, and they say, well, this is all I've known. I mean, I've always been interested in nutrition and fitness, and so if I can't earn something through my good behavior or my good eating patterns, then I don't know where to get that from. And then that's where the gospel comes in. That's where this new truthful message comes from. So it's hard for people to let go of that. And it sneaks up all the time where as dietitians, I think we feel like we still have to do that in ways, and we're constantly trying to tell ourselves that, it's how we were trained.
It's how we were trained. And so, you know, whenever I get a client that is within the medical professions, I prepare them ahead of time and say, there's so much unlearning you're going to have to do.
Oh my gosh,
Because I
yes.
had to do so much unlearning.
It's so hard to let go of because you feel like it's so valuable. You know, you
Yeah.
work so hard for it. And
Yeah.
Well, and there's such a, oh man, if there's not a huge truth in, that's a whole marketing scheme in and of itself. And and I would say this about therapy. And you know, obviously for those listening who are a dietitian in the diet culture, you know, it's not all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
This is what
Right.
you guys are choosing to do, what you see to do the culture, and it's not shame on them. And it's not shame on people who aren't trauma-centered therapists.
Right.
But the reality is that you get out of grad school and you get out of school and you learn what's been passed down for 40 years that hasn't changed. Those things had good intentions, but we learn more.
Yeah.
But these systems of care aren't shifting as fast as the culture is shifting.
Right.
And so people get out of grad school as a counselor and they're like, I have no clue how to deal with somebody who had anything more than just a general anxiety disorder. And so people go to therapy for 4 years and they come in here to me or another therapist and they say, I've been in therapy for 3 years and I've never heard the word trauma.
Yeah.
I heard communication skills. Well, me and my wife, she had an affair and I had an affair and we've been in therapy for a year and we've been working on communicating better. And if we just, the therapist said if we just communicate better, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you do realize like you both have PTSD,
Yeah.
or close to it, some trauma diagnosis that is causing these things. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing that you guys are describing. We have this culture that just kind of is doing the same thing and it works for the system. Like it works. Even how to say it, it's complicated to do it the right way.
Yeah.
For our clients, what's best for people. It's complicated because it's nuanced and it takes time and people don't want that. They won't buy it. Right. And so if we can put things in a cookie cutter fashion, like you learn this and you get your license as a counselor, you do this and you get a dietitian, then you can go and just give that to the people. They'll be satisfied. Right. It's the same thing we can get into food allergies.
For a while.
For a while.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with food allergies. One of the things that we've realized, as parents of a kid with FPI is we've been trying to figure out, like, why do our kids have this? And so MTHFR, we found out we both have that, and you guys can explain that probably better than I can. But then we start looking at the research of why is it that kids have so many food allergies, and we start looking at all the antibiotics we've taken over the last 30 to 40 years of our life. Yeah. And it's like every time I go to the doctor, if I have a virus or a bacteria, whatever I have, the doctor's like, here's a Z-Pack. Here's a, shot.
Yeah.
And I'm there like, thank you. You just gave me something that fixes the problem. 2 days later, I feel a little bit better. And I'm like, that worked. What I don't realize is that I was already going to be better 2 days later.
Yeah.
I didn't, if I would have drank water and taken care of myself and slept, I probably would have felt even better faster. But now I took this thing that the culture's saying is no harm, no foul.
Right.
But really it changes my makeup. And it kills my bacteria and it changes the way that I function because I don't need it. And so the idea that I can inject something into my body and it's just neutral is not real. It's not science.
Yeah.
And that evolved, like the healthcare system, like that evolved over time because doctors had to change the way they were practicing to give the people what they wanted. People want to feel better. So they're going and they're saying, hey, I have these symptoms. I want you to fix me today, right now.
Give me something.
Give me something. Yeah. So it evolved over time where doctors started writing that prescription more and more because that's what they wanted. And so now we're seeing the effects of that. We're seeing the gut dysbiosis. We're seeing more food allergies and things like that. And a lot of the research on that is in its infant stages. Nutrition research takes forever.
Yeah, it does.
Because it's so hard to control, and in laboratory settings, it's great to study rats. We'll draw as much conclusion as we can, but at the end of the day, they're still just rats.
Absolutely.
And we can't always apply those like blanket statements to humans, and our behaviors are much different. And so, when it comes to, we've been talking about that. That's like a central theme of everything we've been talking about is that food allergies and all of that have become a side effect of treating the symptom instead of the problem, instead of the person as a whole. If more people were tested for the MTHFR gene mutation, then we would be able to see, okay, well, this female is married to a male, who has this same gene mutation. Okay, well, they should be taking these vitamins that are formulated in a way that their bodies can actually absorb them properly and process them properly. And then we would have children who are better set up to prevent against some of these issues. And I'm not saying that we can prevent food allergies in this way. Yeah. But what I am saying is that we have the ability to make a difference in this area if only we would be a little bit more proactive and aware of what effect our actions are having down the road, long term.
Yeah, and we've learned that in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The study of epigenetics and how what your grandparents smoked or ate or drank or experienced socially has passed down to your parents and to you, and makes you more susceptible. So if you smoke, then your granddaughter is more likely to be obese. Like, we know there's this connection, and we're figuring this out. But you're right, the research, the proving it, quote unquote, is still far behind the actual situation, and it's not with bad intention. You know, it's not like I think all doctors and everybody's just like
No,
trying to hurt
absolutely
people.
not.
We do it to ourselves. We're just as responsible because it
Yeah.
goes back to we don't want to drink water and exercise and eat correctly and
Yeah.
we don't want to stop and connect. Well, why do I want to do these things? Why do I want to eat this way? Why do I feel bad about myself? Does that connect to my parents? What did I learn about that? Like,
Yeah.
but you have to have all that information to make better decisions.
You do.
You know, but we come to professionals, all of us, and go, I don't want to know any of that. What is the thing that I can do to fix this now?
Fast and easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then we as professionals build a system that allows that to happen because we got to make money.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
you're
we got
so right.
we got to
Yep.
provide stuff for our family.
Yeah.
And you're wanting it, and you're the consumer. So marketing wise, I'm going to give you what you're asking for, or I'm going to
Yeah.
at least find a way to justify it so we both win. But we don't see the long-term cultural effects that's
Right.
causing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back a little bit to the research, like I think it's also important to clarify that when it comes to research about the body, a lot of times we are looking at correlations. We're not looking at causations, but it's so easy for people to just look and be like, okay, X equals Y.
Yes.
You know, and so
Black and white. Mhm.
going back to what you discussed, you know, epigenetics is so young. Even if we have a gene marker, there is not a guarantee that that's gonna cause any problems down the line. And so, the example that you gave was, you know, our grandparents affect us. Okay, so if our grandparents were smokers, the example that you used was, you know, then we're seeing that's correlated
Yeah, yeah.
to obesity. And I'm going to use obesity like this because that's what we do in our fields. But it's what studies are out there, they're not using it as correlative data. They're using it as causation.
Yep.
Yeah, so they're saying X caused Y, when in reality, those two are correlated. So if we look at, okay, this person was a smoker, we might have some oral fixation going on. We also had an increase in access to convenience food. We had a shift in our culture during that time of, you know, many people in that generation were just coming out of the Depression. And so there's a lot of like cultural influences that had on their effects of eating and why they chose to eat. And then during that time, we had a huge rise in diet culture come in. You know, we think and look back at the 80s and the 90s and just look at all of the history of dieting.
How it's evolved. I mean,
Yeah, and how it's evolved. And how has weight cycling through the evolution of diet culture, how has that affected our genetics that influence the makeup of our bodies today? And so what we look at is that social determinants of health are so much more complex than we give it credit for.
Yep.
So we make these easy statements, you know, X causes Y,
Yeah.
when in reality it's like that's one tiny piece of the puzzle over here.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And we have all these other things: our environment, our social system, had family,
Yep.
you know, all of those things are influencing who we are, who we become as a person, and our health, and also our body size. So when we think about, that goes back to what we talked about earlier with health at every size. We like to, diet culture tells us that we are in direct control of our body size.
Yeah.
And that's just simply not the case. We are
Yep.
far less able to control that than what diet culture sells us.
Well, and have a baby, right? I mean, like that's the
Yeah.
one thing Jason and I've been talking about.
Yeah.
You have a baby and your hips change, and like they don't go back to where they were,
Right.
and now all of a sudden you can't fit in the pants you used to, and it's not because you're eating wrong or you're unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's because your body changed.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so there are just like factual things that prove what you're saying is true, is that you
Absolutely.
can't control that unless you just say, well, I don't ever want that to happen, so I'm not going to have kids.
Yeah.
Like, so, and people choose that, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but
Yeah.
the emotional component that makes those decisions is so different. I mean, you know, it's crazy.
But the message is that you have to get your pre-baby body back.
Oh,
yeah.
gosh. Oh yeah. Don't get on Instagram. I mean, that's, you know, that's the comparison
back.
game is ridiculous. You know,
Yeah.
like even and as a husband, like I'm talking to all the men out there, like we have these expectations, or we see other women who did this, or we hear about this person. She, you know, well, she only gained 20 pounds, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Or had a belly-only pregnancy.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh, my
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, she only looks
The pressure.
pregnant from the front, you know?
Right.
Everything else is the same in the back.
Why
Or
is
just
it
that
wrong?
idea that like you're
Yeah.
eating for two.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole other thing. I didn't know. I mean, I just
Yeah.
thought that was the case. Like,
Yeah.
when you know, Jason's gonna eat a bunch, and she's like, "That's like one more piece of bread the first trimester." You know,
Right.
she's like, "It's not much," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "What?"
If you can tolerate it.
Yeah, exactly. She was puking too much to eat. But,
Yeah.
Right.
but the point is that like, for her, she's small and she gained 40 pounds, 45 pounds, whatever it was. That was a lot for her.
Yeah.
For somebody else, they may gain. So it just, all of that is so variable, which takes me back to the point that I nag on all the time, is that from a political system, political politics, meaning, I mean, all of that plays into politics, who pays for pharmacology, all these things.
Yeah. Funding.
They are trying to do the best they can to fund for the general population. And the problem that we run into is that then as providers, we are only focusing on the general.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at people and going, tell me your story.
That's
What's
harder.
going on with you?
Absolutely.
What's your family background? What's your system? What's happened to you? Now let's figure out what we're going to do about eating or addiction or sex or marriage,
Yeah.
instead of being this one size fits all kind of thing. And so, I mean, it's all paralleling. So I love what you're saying. And I hope that people can, that are listening can hear this and go, oh man, this makes way more sense than what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Because this has only brought me shame and guilt and frustration.
Yeah. Well, and when, kind of circling back to talking about, this message that certain diets or certain ideas are the only way. And I was thinking about food documentaries and just how it's an oversimplification to a very complex issue. And a lot of people get a lot of information from food documentaries. And I don't
Talk about like Food Inc. or something like that.
Yes, right. And I don't think they're inherently bad. I really don't. But I just see people walking away from those from that information having more shame than feeling empowered to change their patterns for healthy reasons. And I think that we're just seeing that so often, is that oversimplification, because people want that. And I wanted it as a dietitian. I wanted to have a one size fits all. I wanted, or maybe like 4 sizes, I just wanted something, some structure.
A handful,
Yeah, just give me something, and it's just not the way. You treat it one-on-one, individualized, and I think that that's a misconception that people have about dietitians, especially if you talk with a dietitian maybe at a social gathering or something, and you ask a specific random question about a diet or something. And
what are some things that you guys get asked a lot as dietitians?
Well, oftentimes people want to tell you about their diet that they're on, and maybe they want your affirmation, or they want your you to approve, but we can't give it. We don't know about it, and often it's not something that we would recommend. But I've just kind of I let people talk, and I've
smile and nod.
Yep. If they want my input, then they'll ask for it. But oftentimes it's really just listening, and then people have to be ready for that change. They have to be ready for the process, and
they don't really want you to answer.
They really don't. Yeah. So I think that's a big misconception, and I don't know. I think people listening, I just want them to know that walking away from something, education, whether it's a food documentary, an article, or something where it has been oversimplified, like Ashley was saying, where it's not it's correlation, not causation. We don't really have the answer, and a lot of times dietitians can't give that answer, and that people think that they're not being cared for because we don't give them rules and we don't give them that. So I want people to be very careful with where they seek their information, and especially with documentaries and things that with ulterior motive or a hidden agenda, that I hope that that's not your motivation to change, because that creates a lot of fear and a lot of shame, and makes you label a lot of foods that and think that you're bad because you eat those certain foods. So
we got good time. What I want to go back to, what are some things that you guys, for the average person, that you would deem as kind of those core starting things that can be very, lead to very unhealthy mind states and identity. And so one, what I would say that JC's always harping on is the clean your plate mentality. Like, she can't stand that.
Yeah.
And even internally, I can't either now, but like sometimes that history when Grady's like not eating or Jude's not eating, I'm like, you didn't eat enough. Like, you have to eat. But they know when they're not hungry.
Yeah,
and then
it's so hard as a parent not to, because that's how a lot of us were raised.
I remember sitting at a table, and Dad, forgive me, but you did it. Sitting at a table, and I was made to eat. It was either like mac and hamburger helper or peas, and I can't remember which one it was, but I had to sit there forever, and I finally eat it, and I just threw up everywhere because I'd already worked myself up so much, you know. And I see Grady do that. Like if he didn't like something, he'll eat it, and he's like, you know, wanting to throw up because of the mental aspect of it. And so so speak to some of those kind of I don't know what to call them.
Feeding dynamics.
Yeah, or just like the, you know, because those are, people think they're simple, and what I see in mental health is people go, well, that's just how it happens, and that's not that big of a deal, but it like leads to all these things we've been talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I can speak from, you know, parent perspective that it's so hard not to want your kids to practice the same eating patterns that you received as a child, or kind of enforce what your parents enforced. And you know, you think you're doing what's best for them. You think that you're nourishing them, and there's also some authority in there too, where you're thinking, oh, you're going to do what I tell you right now. There's pride there. And it's overwhelming, because it's just one more thing as a parent that you are trying to conquer is you know, getting your child to eat healthful food. And then there's so much shame. I know as a dietitian, but I'm sure just as a mother, for feeding your child the perfect foods and making sure that they're getting all the vitamins, all the nutrients. So it's such a big area, a lot of room for shame, a lot of room for just stress. And so
I'm laughing because JC asked me the other day, she was like, when's the last time you ate a vegetable?
Do you? Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I need to eat some.
It's a hard one. But, but I mean, I think from me, I can relate to how challenging it is to feel confident in what you're doing. But I do think that we don't realize that our children are able to eat intuitively. I mean, up until I feel like around age 5 is just completely they know how to feed themselves. I mean, we're in charge of what we give them, obviously, and timing and things. And I know people have different views of that, but if you give your child that freedom, if you allow them to practice their autonomy in that area, it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable watching it and letting them do that, and especially doing that in front of loved ones that you trust and admire the way that they've raised children.
Or a spouse who doesn't agree.
Or a spouse. My husband and I disagree on some things, and, you know, it's just funny how now I can see what I was doing just a year ago. I'm changing. So I'm constantly growing in this area and learning more. And that's a vulnerable place. I mean, it's humbling to think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that just last year to my 1.5-year-old or 2-year-old. But I'm thankful for the change, and I'm thankful that I'm evolving and teaching Beck as well. And I know, even though Beck, that's my husband, even though he doesn't, this isn't his profession, he teaches me a lot, and he teaches me to chill out a little bit, and you know, because I can get really controlling with it. So you don't have to agree necessarily with your spouse on this, and y'all can teach each other. You're just doing this together and trying to figure this out together. Yeah.
I feel like we need a whole podcast.
We absolutely do.
This.
Yeah. I mean, y'all are covering such good stuff. This is one of my favorite ones so far, and I know I say that all the time, but it's good. So what are? I mean, I need some key, like, clean your plate. Like, what are some things that if people are listening that, you know, they need to stop doing?
Okay.
You know.
So first things first, our standard disclaimer: parents, you are doing the best that you can with what you know in this moment. I always tell my clients, because we have to talk about history. Yeah. And I always say, I want you to know, we always assume the best of intentions unless you tell me otherwise.
We're not judging you.
Right. We assume that your mom and dad, you know, or caregiver, whoever it was in your life, they meant it for the best.
Absolutely.
You know.
Well, I think that's a problem why people don't change, is that there's so much shame around, oh my gosh, I did this last year, right? Or, you know, like as a therapist, it's like, oh, I look back at when there were 2 and now I've learned all this stuff and now I wish I wouldn't have done this. Like we had a season of timeout or corner. So nothing was working with Grady. And like, I was like, okay, well, the only thing that's going to work, like I'm not a spanker, so we don't, you know, that's what we choose for our family. So the one thing I was thinking is like, okay, corner. And I'm thinking discipline and following and being obedience. And then after like 3-4 weeks of doing that, I'm like, you know, reading some stuff that I'd read before and reading some new stuff. And I'm like, I'm doing this all wrong, you know, and I had to go, we're not going to do this. We're going to do time in. I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to help you process. I'm not going to put you in there. And every time I was doing it, which wasn't a lot, I felt so much shame and knew it was wrong, but I had no other option.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of us find ourselves, is we have really good intentions for things, but our options are limited, and we're tired, and we're parents, and we're trying to do the best thing.
Yeah.
And so we do the least harmful thing possible. But then we learn, and you get to this point where you have to choose humility.
Yeah.
And you have to look back and go, it's okay that I messed up. I'm good enough still, but how do I change going forward? And what I see with people is they don't want to do that work.
Yeah.
So then they just keep doing things that are unhealthy. And that causes way more
Or
problems.
feel like that it's seemingly working. You know, they don't.
Yeah, for
we
sure.
don't always see the damage that we're doing when it's
Absolutely.
happening. So you just do what
Absolutely.
works.
So, at the heart of it, parents, we want our kids to, we want them to eat.
Yeah.
We want them to eat a variety of foods, to not be a picky eater. For one, we don't want to listen to the meltdown that's going to happen when they're hangry.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
we want them to sleep well and not get out of bed at 2 a.m. saying that they're hungry. Like, we want them to eat. We all
And they
want them to
will.
eat.
Yeah.
So, you know, like you mentioned, like the younger kids, I would say that probably stops around 3.5, where like they're true intuitive eaters. My parents are always commenting on FaceTime with my son that, you know, my husband loves Oreos. And so Oreos are a big deal in our family.
Yeah.
The kids, like Liam will like jump up and down. He's my youngest. He loves cookies. And so she is always astonished when we are on camera and Liam will like throw away the other half of his cookie.
Yeah.
Because when he's done, because a cookie holds no moral value for him.
Yeah.
Yep.
It is not elevated because you didn't say you have to eat all your dinner before you get your cookie. By
It's not
doing
a
that,
prize or a reward. It's
yeah,
just
you
neutral.
just entered
Yeah.
tug of war. So at 2.5, he doesn't get that. At 4, 3.5, 4, you're getting up there in age and older, you're entering a power struggle with your kids. So especially if you have strong-willed children, which I have too, if you say you have to clean your plate, or you have to eat all of your broccoli before you can have a cookie, what you did was just elevate the cookie. Now the cookie is the best thing ever. The cookie is the prize.
Yep.
And you have to get through that. Now that broccoli, even if you liked it before, is disgusting and repulsive and you hate it and you never want to eat broccoli again.
Because all you can
as
think
a
about is
child.
the cookie.
Because all you can think about is the cookie. And because your parent, well-intentioned, just told you had to, and kids want autonomy.
Yeah.
It begins then, just that young. You tell them they have to, they say no.
Yeah.
Unless they force themselves to do it, they force themselves to finish their plate.
When
in
they're not
order-
hungry.
When they're not hungry
Right.
to get what they want. And so when I talked about your external forces coming in and overriding that interoceptive awareness, remember that those internal cues, that happens sometimes by well-intentioned parents.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's by saying you have to finish all the food on your plate, or you have to eat all your vegetables before you can do X, Y, or Z. So, if you want some
Which is the
hard-
beginning of putting value on
Yeah.
dessert versus broccoli.
This makes
That's
you
right.
good. This makes
Yeah.
mommy happy. I'm happier with you
Yeah.
if you
Ooh.
eat the food that I tell you to eat.
And that's tough
Yeah.
because you do want them to eat broccoli
You do.
over
You
Oreo
so
cookies.
do.
You
Yeah.
do.
Yep.
But the
and
more...
there's a lot of the
Yeah.
other side. We're talking about in the middle, right? We're not talking about
Yeah.
being extreme, but there's a lot of people who give pushback because it's like, well, no, then they're going to be in control of you,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because this is the swing in culture with parenting. It used to be,
Yeah.
kids are to be seen, not heard. Parents are super authoritative and not emotional.
Yeah.
Now we've swung all the way to helicopter parenting and doing everything else, and it's in the middle where it's like, because people hear me say,
Yeah.
like if I'm talking about spanking, that it's not effective, and then they're like, well, you just don't want to have I'm like, no, you give them a consequence 100% of the time, but it doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be that.
Yeah, it
Sure.
could be, in this case, it could be
So what to do is my
natural
question.
consequences.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So in this case, I will give my 4-year-old as the example. She's feisty, and she's opinionated, and
Yep.
she does good old Uncle Clint, and so she will engage with you. If you set the stage, she will engage, and she will die on that hill.
Yeah.
And so, what I've really had to work with my beloved husband, CJ, on is that he is very much like, one more bite.
Oh, yes. That's a big one. Yeah.
Or just eat. And I know, and sometimes I catch myself doing that too, because at the heart of it, you want them to eat.
Oh, yeah, I
Yes.
do it
I
all the
want
time.
them to be
Just
nourished and
eat.
full. Yeah.
Yes. So what we've really tried to work on is that, one, you always give a food that is a guarantee. You need a win.
I love this. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is great.
And I'm not saying that that has to be the most quote unquote healthful option. In
Right.
my household, if you want your kid to eat, you give them mac and cheese. My kids love mac and cheese.
Ours is crackers.
Yeah, crackers.
Crackers are
That's a good one too.
That's our choice for what
Yeah.
I know that they will eat.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Grady's big about pepperonis and turkey and chips.
Yep.
He will eat that at least some every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So if
Okay.
you want to have, a mealtime that's peaceful, you give them a food that you know that they're going to eat, and you don't limit the quantity either, because they, that's, again, if you're limiting quantity, you're an external influence saying you only get this much.
Yeah.
But you give them a food you know they're going to eat, a food they might eat, or a food they usually, eat from time to time.
Right.
And then if you do want to introduce anything new, that's the point where you introduce something new, but only one thing at a time. Otherwise, it gets too overwhelming. They've never had these foods, or it's foods that you don't like. I do encourage my parents that I work with that just because they don't like it now doesn't mean that they're never going to like it.
Yeah.
I gave my daughter green beans for 2.5 years
Yeah.
regularly, multiple times a month, before she ever ate her first green bean.
Yeah. It takes a lot.
Yeah.
It takes so much patience from
Yeah.
the parent and consistency. I mean,
Yeah. And you have to stop and ask yourself, like, why am I doing it this way?
Yeah.
Like, why am I being so hardcore about that? And you'll realize it has so much more to do with you and your emotions
That's
and your
right.
history.
Your
than it-
relationship with food.
than it does with your
Yeah.
kid.
100%.
Yeah, so it took patience in that moment, but if I had been one to just, say, just try a green bean. You have to eat 2 green beans before you can leave this table.
Yeah.
She would never have tried that green bean.
Yeah.
But because I was neutral about it, it was just there.
I
And
know.
she sees mommy eat those green beans, Fortunately for me, it's one of my favorite vegetables, but, it's one of those things where modeling is so important. You model the fact, and we had this conversation yesterday at the dinner table. Evie said, Mommy, you didn't eat all the food on your plate. And she sees a lot of times I do eat all the food on my
Yeah,
plate because
that's great.
I've gotten pretty good at knowing my stomach and how much I want to eat.
Right.
But she said, you didn't eat all the food on your plate. You need to finish your food. And I said, no, Mommy's tummy said that I'm satisfied, I've had enough to eat. I'm good.
Yeah.
So if you set your kids up for success with foods that, one, they're comfortable with and you're comfortable with, and you're not limiting, you're not restricting those types of things, then it becomes something that is exciting,
Yeah.
And so some days she tries new foods and some days she doesn't, and it's remaining as neutral as you can. And so we talked about consequences because the kid is not in control, the
Yeah.
parent is in control.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out what sense of control you are giving to your child. And so, we decide, and this comes from Ellen Satter, the division of responsibility. We decide what, because we buy the food, and when. She decides if she eats and how much.
Yes.
And that is the hardest part. The if is a big one. So even if sometimes you give them food that is a guarantee, they love that food, sometimes they're just like, no, I want something else that you're not going to feed them, And so it's not, you're not a short order cook. You're not catering.
Oh gosh, so stressful to me.
Yeah. And
yeah.
so Evie has learned some natural consequences. We prepare her. And I've said multiple times, I noticed that you didn't eat anything for dinner tonight. You know that your tummy is going to be hungry. And she says, no, look at my tummy. It's full. And I'm like, okay, you know you're going to be hungry. We're going to talk about like the next time that you eat is breakfast in the morning. What do you want to eat for breakfast? I'm already preparing her, right? What do you want to eat for breakfast? She'll name off whatever. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great. That's the next time that you're going to eat. Are you sure you've had enough to eat to fill your tummy?
Yeah.
And a lot of times she'll say yes. And so you've already prepared them for this moment that, eventually she goes to bed and she's laying in bed. Mommy, she's still laying in bed at this time. I'm hungry. I said, do you remember at dinner time when I asked you if you'd eaten enough to eat? And she's like, well, yeah. I said, and the next time you get to eat is breakfast time. And so that's a really hard thing for a parent. I'm not starving her. If she's melting down and losing her ever-loving mind, of course you're not going to starve your child.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course not.
Well, that's what I
But-
always try to say is like, they're going to let you know if it's serious.
Yeah.
Like if they really need it, they're going
Right.
to let you know most of the time. Like,
Yeah.
Right. In this case, it was not serious. It was a delay tactic, or she may have actually been feeling pretty hungry because she didn't eat anything for dinner.
Yep.
And so she got up the next day. She ate a really big
I'm
breakfast.
sure she did.
Yeah. But it was part of that was letting her learn a natural consequence. It is your choice. If you choose not to eat, and you've given them food. You've provided a supportive environment. If you've chosen not to eat, then your tummy is going to be empty.
Right.
You learned a natural consequence.
Yep.
And it's
She is
teaching
only
them hunger,
Yeah.
to read their hunger and realize that, oh, wow, that's something that I really need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
But man, it's so emotional.
It
You know,
is.
and I do want to say this for people because I am these people. You know, circumstances are different for everybody.
Oh,
and, you know,
absolutely.
for us, and we talk about this all the time, if I could have done it on paper, we would have done things a lot differently. But because of food allergies, we're so limited that we're more flexible than I would have been. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we had to breastfeed moving around. We had to, when we tried to transition them to formula at one point, like, we had to sit them up in the middle of the night and let them watch television because it was the only thing to get. But Grady was dropping weight and going underneath. So it was like, but that formed some really bad habits that then we had to break out of. And like, we let Grady graze, so he'll play and go to the table and sit down. And so now we're having to redo that, where we're trying to get Grady and Jude to sit at the table. But because Grady doesn't ever do it, Jude doesn't want to do it.
Right.
And so then they're up and down and up and down. And sometimes I go, well, what does it matter?
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of the case, is you have to know your kids and your family, and you have to, you know, check in on what they need and what's best for them. And it's not to withhold to get in a power struggle. It's to
Right.
teach good lessons about food.
Right.
Yeah.
So
The
it's
big
not,
picture.
I'm not going to feed you because I'm in this power struggle. It's for the long term, like,
I'm teaching you lessons.
yeah, because Grady loves a snack at night, and it's genuinely because none of his food has high fat. So
Yeah.
he will eat a good dinner
Yeah.
at 5:30, and at 7:30 when we're going to bed, he's hungry.
Yeah.
And I want to fight that sometimes, like, no, because sometimes it is about, I just want to
Right.
stay up. But now, like, he just always just eats a snack, he didn't stay up longer. He's just hungry.
Yeah.
And he'll eat 3 pieces of turkey, a handful of pepperoni, and a bowl of chips. And I'm like, if you can eat all that every night,
Yeah.
it's because you're hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the parenting part of me is like, that's really annoying that I give you a bath, I get you ready, I pray with you, I read your book, and now you're like,
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
I'm like, oh, are you tricking me? You
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah.
that's, so if you're out there and you're like, no, this works, like, you know, your parent gut, like, that may be the case.
Right.
Yeah. Some kids, like, they need if you eat an early dinner, they're going to need something before
Right.
bedtime, you know?
Based off the structure.
Yeah, I
of
know
your
y'all eat
eating
a lot
patterns.
later.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, so my kids are eating, dinner sometime between 6 and 7, and then they're in bed by 7:30.
Right.
So you know what I'm saying? Like,
It's a
they don't
big
have to wait a
difference.
whole
Shouldn't
long.
really-
Yeah,
Yeah,
my kids eat
so
at like
it is
5:15.
Yeah.
Because they're starving by the
Yeah.
time it's that time.
Right.
And then 2.5 hours later, we're about to go to bed at 7:30, and Grady at 7:15 is hungry. And I'm like, okay, like, we got to deal with this. But
Well,
Yeah.
but it's all messy. It's, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's where the parent has autonomy. You get to choose when. Okay? So you get to choose that your child is going to eat before bedtime because that's what his body needs. That's his energy needs. That's demand on his body. And that's what's going to help him sleep his best. Like, you know, your kid.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, whenever we're talking about things, you know, that's what's so complicated about it on a podcast. Like, this is a very generalization and everything is nuanced. You
Right.
know, everything is all about, like, if you were sitting in my office, like, we'd be talking through all of those scenarios for sure, because we want to make sure that it fits your family, you know.
Yeah.
So those are some, like, hard and fast, you know, tips, I
good.
guess, about family feeding dynamics. But yeah, those major takeaways are things like, you know, not cleaning your plate, not coaxing or bribing.
Rewards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I just to add to that, I think that something that was really hard for me. Elizabeth is 3.5, and she's at this age where she gets fixated on something and wants she wants what she wants, and she knows it. You know, like the jelly beans or the things that are sugary and taste good. You know, she wants those, and so. I don't want to tell her no all the time, and I am in charge of when she has those things. So telling her, that sounds so yummy, you know, that sounds really good. I know why you want that. So let's put that on your plate at snack time, or let's put that on your plate at dinner time. I know that really helped me a lot. Just help her to see that food that you're asking for is not bad. It's just not the time for that food.
That's really good.
Kind of creating structure around that, and maybe a little predictability, like with juice. You know, we give her juice at a specific time of the day, not because juice is bad or you know, she doesn't ask for it as much because she knows when it's gonna happen.
You're not restricting it. You're
No.
regularly providing it in a way that
Yeah.
she can anticipate.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they get used to anything because
Yeah.
Grady, you know, because of his allergies, never had anything but water. And now he doesn't want to drink juice. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
6 and like he's drank juice like a couple of times. Like now he's just now every once in a while like, can I have, apple juice? And it's not
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the time he wants water. Jude, he's been drinking milk from the get-go. Like he'll drink everything. He's like, I want
Yeah.
juice, I want apple juice, I want
Yeah.
orange juice, I want milk, I want my milk in the morning. Like, so it depends on the kid too.
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time. So what I do want to say generally is the other thing is with everything, if you're listening, we don't, striving for perfection in these things is going to make you do everything wrong. You're going to, instead of doing, like when it comes to food, I have the same kind of litmus test for everything. Like try to do the right thing 7 out of 10 times. You're gonna screw up. You're gonna be on vacation. You're gonna travel. You're gonna have a crisis.
Yeah.
Your kid's gonna be melting down, and sometimes you're gonna cave and do
Yeah.
something that you don't think is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Everybody does that.
Well, that's the words that I use with my clients is that every eating opportunity is the chance to learn something new.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
So that's why you're like, it's not going to be perfect. Okay, this happened. What did we learn from this experience?
There we go. Yep.
Yeah.
And so if you're listening, get with a dietitian, call Rachel, call Ashley, call somebody in your area, find the right person for you, because you can't do this by yourself.
No.
We've done an hour and something of how incredibly nuanced and deep
Yeah.
this is. And so if you're out there feeling overwhelmed or struggling with your weight or struggling with your eating or struggling with whatever it is that you feel like is the problem, it may or may not be the problem. So you have to come in and talk with somebody, because you might come in and say, my weight's the problem. And then through this process, realize really the weight's not the issue. It's something else. And
Right.
you're happy with your weight, but you're not emotionally happy with life or whatever the thing is that you have going on.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that I'm super thankful for y'all coming on here and doing this. Is there any, in the last 3 minutes that we have, both of you, something that you want people to know that that you like to say? Or we feel like we covered it all.
so much.
Any
Yeah.
hot button things that you're like, I don't
I'm
want.
sure later I'll think of it. I'll think of what I wanted to leave you guys with. I don't know.
I'd say just the reminder that, healing is possible, and that just because you've lived, this way for 2 months, 2 years, 20 years of your life, that, you can heal. It's never too late to seek out healing. And I know that's the same with mental health as well, is that, it's something, eating is something that you do every day. And so if it is a relationship that you feel is broken or hard or difficult in any way, seek out help.
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of people want to, if they're weary in this area of their lives and they feel like they've been struggling with it for so long,
Yeah.
they believe this lie that they can't change and that it'll never be different. They've tried everything, and there's just so much hope and there's so much freedom available. And it is a process, but it's so incredibly worth it. I mean, we're talking about changing the rest of your life, and you eat 3+ times a day. And
Yep.
so this huge opportunity to renew your mind and transform the way that you think and your relationships, your relationship with the Lord, and just experiencing Him in new ways and figuring out, how to allow Him to transform that area of your life. It's work, and it's new, and it feels uncomfortable, but it is so worth it. And there's freedom available that you didn't even know is there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's your private practice called?
Freedom Found Nutrition.
Okay, awesome. And yours?
Fulfilled Nutrition
Nice.
Therapy.
Awesome. So you can find both of them on our website, or you can go to their Facebook pages and check that out. You can call them. Y'all both take insurance, right? Yep.
Yes, working on that, but
Yeah.
yes, in the future.
Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on, and good luck to everybody out there. God bless you, and have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.